Kyle Rittenhouse got dragged over the coals this past weekend. And
wait, so just hold on, but just tell this for people who don't know. Tell the whole story of what, because I do know the story of what he got dragged for. So go ahead, tell people the story.
So basically, in the middle of the night, I think it was Friday night, he tweets out that he's going to be writing in Ron Paul, and a lot of people in MAGA country lose their effing minds. They go absolutely ballistic. I'll get into some of the details of how ballistic they go, but basically, I see him for the first time. I've never met Kyle before, but he follows Josie, the redhead libertarian, and he's like, Josie, hey, and then I'm like, I'm gonna talk to this kid. I gotta get the lowdown on what happened here. And I end up talking to him like 15, 20 minutes, and he gives me the whole rundown that he had met Ron Paul for the first time that night at YaleCon, and he was just enchanted. He was just like, this is the guy. Trump wasn't very good on two-way. Ron Paul is great on everything. I'm going to write him in. Totally authentic, totally sincere, totally genuine. He then has hours of phone calls with the Trump camp where they basically tell him, they give him assurances that things will be different in the second term, and he ends up changing his mind, and he puts out the endorsement for Trump. Setting that all aside, I put out a post and I say, playing off of the Dom Luker, you've been exposed nonsense. I say, Kyle Rittenhouse, you have been chosen to be rehabilitated, and I'm just playing off of that, and I just say that he's an awesome guy. He's such a nice guy, and then I'm thinking to myself, like when we're 20 minutes in this conversation, I'm looking at him, I'm like, the last time, or like the only thing I know you from is you on your back in Kenosha, just rocketing off shots at assailants over and over again. And he's such a like innocent, sweet, sincere kid. It's just the juxtaposition between what we knew him from and what he is today. Bizarre. But I think of him as an American hero. I know a lot of people say I shouldn't, but I think the way he defended himself and then had to fight for his life and defend the Second Amendment at the same time, I thought it was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, first of all, about the story, like the original story of Kyle Rittenhouse, I think you could certainly argue, and like I would say, if there were young people who are listening to my show, if there are like nationwide violent riots, I totally support people defending property and defending people and all of that. I'd say probably if you're 20 or whatever he was, how old was he when it all went down?
17.
He was 17. Was he that young? Jeez. Okay, I'd say probably don't go dolo 17-year-old with your rifle and be like, I'm just going to do this myself. It's like, I think it would be wise to plan and have a group there with you, a well-trained group, preferably. But I do think that kind of, and I haven't met the guy. I mean, he was there, but I didn't talk to him at all. You did. But that kind of is consistent with what you're saying, right? A little bit of like a sweet, innocent kid who is like, I'm going to go do the right thing, and maybe didn't completely plan for like how, even obviously things could have gone really bad. He could have been seriously hurt. But even in his situation, first of all, before you're even charged and go to trial, how difficult that's going to be to kill somebody. It was clearly in self-defense. I mean, I thought that was obvious from the time I first saw the video. I'm on the podcast talking about how it was clearly self-defense back when it happened. But still, that's quite a toll on your own soul to take. And then to go through a trial where you think you might be looking at life in jail. The kid's been through quite a lot. But I do think the spirit of what he did was somewhat heroic, and the way he was just ruthlessly demonized in the corporate media. I don't even know if people like remember, there's so many things that the corporate media does that are so twisted and sick that it's hard to remember all of them. Literally just as you're saying this, I remember, but they literally all started talking about how he was like a racist, hunter who crossed state lines with a weapon illegally to go try to kill people. By the way, none of this was true. None of it was true. The guy got acquitted. He acted in self-defense, was literally won in a court of law in front of a jury of his peers. And of course, not so much as an apology from any of those people who said that. And by the way, not just the corporate press. I know people like on social media and stuff, like who were like so vicious toward this kid, this 17-year-old who's like, however you feel about him, he was on his back He shot up at a guy who they just missed him with like a skateboard. Another guy charged him with a gun. It's not as if he was like a cold-blooded killer who went to kill people. Clearly that he was in a desperate situation. Just absolutely like disgusting how people treated him back in 2020.
I mean, it was the most, especially since you and I are we oftentimes will be critical of the police and excessive use of force and violence and things like that. So we're very accustomed to looking at these types of videos. I've never seen such trigger discipline. I've never seen a guy who's like literally waiting until the last second. He does not want to do this. And it's like every time that keeps happening to him, he's sprinting and then it happens again. And it's like, I mean, it's just remarkable self-control for a I guess a kid of his age. I was going to say a man, but I don't even know if I would call him that at that age. But then, just to see him, all of the people that had stood up for him, I guess you would say, from the Republican side of the aisle that were sending him donations and things like that, they all feel this unbelievable sense of betrayal because he says he's going to write in Ron Paul because to him, the Second Amendment is the most important thing and Trump was not perfect on it. Therefore, I'm going to write in Ron. And to have them flip on him the way they did was just stunning to me, honestly, because from, and I guess this is once again, the libertarian versus the GOP divide where it's like, no, I actually care about these on a principled matter. Like he defended himself. He utilized the Second Amendment to keep himself alive. He did nothing wrong ultimately, other than maybe being naive, as you said earlier. And for you guys to now say that, like Joey Manorino said, I wish he had been convicted. Like, just pure madness.
Who is that? Joey Manorino?
He's like the Laura Loomer of the conservatives. He's just a male version of that. But
how old is he? Ballpark.
Manorino?
Yeah. Like, what do you think?
30-ish. I don't know.
Okay. You know why? Because the reason first off, because I just like I'm so disgusted by the like broadly speaking MAGA reaction to him endorsing Ron Paul or saying he's going to write in Ron Paul. And I'm not saying everybody in the Trump movement was like this, but I do just ask the age because I'm like, listen, okay, first of all, as you pointed out, it's like, okay, so he really cares about this one issue, which is guns. And of course, Ron Paul's great on it and Donald Trump's not. And if that's also true, if there's any issue that you just happen to be right about. Ron Paul was also right on that issue, and Donald Trump is at best okay on the issue. Like, that's the truth. There's no issue. Name me one issue that matters. Ron Paul was better on it than Donald Trump is, because that's what Ron Paul did. Listen,
it's obviously true.
There's not even knocking Donald Trump. It's just Ron Paul's thing is that he's right about everything, and Donald Trump's thing is that he wins. So like, okay. So if you want to say, hey, Ron Paul was right about everything, but he couldn't win the presidency, fair point. That's Donald Trump's thing. He can win. Ron Paul's just read everything and knows everything. But for the reason I ask about the guy's age is because like you better not be old enough that you voted in the GOP in 2012 or 2008. Because if you did and you voted for John McCain or Mitt Romney over the Thomas Jefferson of our generation, in fact, substantially better than Thomas Jefferson, if you really want to go just purely on the issues. But like the idea that, and this is what's so wrong, but it's like this is like to all the Trump people out there. And I'm not even hostile to Trump. I gave a speech the other day at Young Americans for Liberty, and I go, listen, if you guys are voting for Trump, I totally understand why. Here's just what I think we should do, even if you are voting for Trump. I don't know if my speech has been posted, but if you can go find it, I bet. But it's just like, hey, look, man, why is it as Donald Trump has his I promised to give the best blowjob to Israel national convention, and as he's going around, you know what I mean, like being essentially running as a like establishment Republican, at least this time. It's not the 2016 campaign. His campaign is basically just like, Kamala Harris is the far left and I'll be a reasonable Republican. It's like, so what? So you're mad at this kid for what? Being good on guns? Like, is anyone in any of you Trump supporters, are you actually arguing with me that Donald Trump's take the guns first and due process second, which is a direct quote? This isn't like find people on both sides. This is a real quote in context that he said, the banning bump stocks or whatever. Are you really saying
Which the media never drags him for, because even though it's true, because they agree with it.
Yeah. No, he won't get dragged for that because it's real. He'll just get dragged for being a Russian agent who praised white nationalists, all that bullshit. But so like, is there any, and if there is anyone, you get an automatic invite onto this show. If you're actually for Trump and you're saying that Donald Trump's position of take the guns first, due process second, is better than Ron Paul's position of the government should have absolutely no restrictions on your right to bear arms. If you're actually saying that position's better, then fine, let me hear your argument, and then we'll take that apart. But if you're conceding, as 99.9% of you would have to, that Ron Paul is better on that issue, what exactly are you saying? That you just demand loyalty?
Yes.
That's you just, because you supported him when he was clearly acting in self-defense, that therefore he must support Donald Trump forever. Like how bad of a position could he take? What if Donald Trump said he's going to ban Christianity? Should he still support him because you supported him when he acted in self-defense? Like, think about how warped. It's like, man, politics just ruins people's brains.
It really does. Just to kind of steel man their position, they fear that they will lose their nation if the Democrats get another 4 years in power. So I think for most of them, they probably would concede that Ron Paul is superior to Donald Trump in many, many ways. Right. Probably not always, like you and I would say, but many ways they would say Ron Paul is better, but he's not running. He can't win. Kamala is the imminent threat. We must defeat her. That's the steel man. But what doesn't excuse any of that is that this is still a young man who, by the way, walks around with an emotional support dog because of the trauma he's experienced, having to take multiple lives. And
I did notice he had trials. A dog there. Oh, geez,
yeah. And then, he's basically like trying to piece his life together. On top of that, he's still only 21. If you're not allowed to be idealistic at 21, well, then I don't want anything to do with you people. You're lunatics. Like, this is just pure madness. So to see the treatment that he got from some of the more prominent influencers on the GOP side, it just really drove home the fact that we are still dealing with a significant cult mentality, and it happens on both sides. You have the Trump derangement syndrome, but as we've said many times, it goes both ways. You have people that are deranged to believe that he's their savior, and people that are deranged to believe that he's the devil. And I'm just not either of those. I'm like he is at best a defensive posture against the onslaught, which is the globalist World Economic Forum plotting against the American people. Like that to me is the best thing I can say about the guy. And they view him as a deity. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I just feel like for me personally, anytime anyone is asking you to turn your brain off and just blindly support something, you're no longer on my team. Right. Whatever my team is, that's not my team. And if you feel that way, then please stop listening to me. I mean, I don't know what else to say. If you're going to say not just being idealistic, but being young and being
principled,
but idealistic and correct, like on the right side of the issue, and you're going to come out and demonize that guy. Like, do you really think it's true? And really just think this through for a second, guys. Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and it was because he was our only shot. And we were going to lose the country if Hillary Clinton was in, and he was going to drain the swamp and all of this. And however you feel about Donald Trump, and I'm certainly I'm kind of with you guys on a lot of things. Obviously, like, the guy was framed by his own intelligence community. He was impeached over nonsense. After that, he had the justice system weaponized against him over nonsense. And after that, a sniper was kind of allowed to get up on a roof, which was a little bit strange. We could talk about that a little bit more. But you're like, okay, but regardless, his first term ended in the lockdowns of 2020 and the disastrous year that was 2020. And then we have 4 years of Joe Biden. Clearly, just electing Donald Trump is best case scenario. What are we talking about? Saving the republic for 3 more years? And then the 4th year is really bad. So, okay, so we need a little, even if you want to support Donald Trump, I get the argument. Okay, we need a little bit better out of him this time. Are you really saying that there should be no influential person, whoever goes, I really like that Ron Paul's perfect on guns? See, the thing is, Clint, I wouldn't have had any problem if anyone in the MAGA movement were to be like, hey, Kyle, I get it. Ron Paul is the gold standard. Or even if it wasn't like what we want to hear, they just go, look, Ron Paul was great on guns, but here's why I think you still got to support Donald Trump, you know, because like, okay, fine. But the way people were viciously attacking him and then kind of celebrating when he caved and or whatever happened. I don't know exactly the details, but when he went, okay, fine, I am supporting Trump. And they're like, fine, you're back. People were like, like you said, I mean, that I saw a few different examples that were bad like that, but like, oh, you think he should have gotten convicted now? Yeah. So that's where you're at now. So what you're saying is that the kid who, you know, as I said, I think somewhat naively, but idealistically wanted to go out and defend people and property during the worst of the riots. By the way, all you MAGA influencers, where were you during the worst of the riots?
Right.
Were you out there with a gun defending people and property? Probably not. I'm not saying I was, but I'm just saying probably not. Okay. So the guy who goes out there and defends that gets raked over the coals by the entire corporate media in a way that none of us have ever experienced. You know what I mean? Like that guy, you're attacking him for saying he's a pure Second Amendment absolutist for the crime of criticizing your president who said take the guns first, due process second. You don't have more criticism for Donald Trump saying that as the president of the United States than this kid? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about that. All I'll say is that if you are a Trump supporter, if your whole thing is, well, we just need to support Donald Trump, we just need to get him elected, just know that there's a group of us who, look, we're not the biggest voting bloc in the world, but we're big enough that Donald Trump had to come speak at our convention and come speak at our Bitcoin conference and all this to try to get us, and just know how much that turns us off from your whole thing, that you care so much more, blatantly care so much more about the figure than any principles.
Yeah, well, exactly. And Kyle Rittenhouse lived out your principles in a way that you guys never will. Like you'll never ever have a moment that demonstrates that level of courage in your effing lives. Never. So let's just remember that. All the people that have, you know, huge followings that are dunking on him in the most vicious way possible. Keeping in mind too that he has already been pilloried and strung up by half of this country. And now the other half, or a portion of it, has seen fit because he got out of line for 10 seconds to do the same thing to him. I was absolutely disgusted by it. And the fact that I then met him a few hours later and got to have a lengthy conversation with him, to see the sincerity in his eyes, that it was like, dude, I had just met Ron Paul. Like, do you understand? And I was like, dude, I understand. Yes, I understand. Of course I understand. This is the most understandable thing ever. If I had just met Ron Paul, I probably would have tweeted that out too. So, you know, it's just, it broke my heart, but I'm glad that, like, what you were saying about, well, what if like an influencer coming out and saying, hey, I'm not in line with this because this is the thing I care about most, and he wasn't good enough on it. And then you end up getting multiple hours of phone calls from Trump's team saying, hey, we're going to be a lot better the second time around. Basically, they're giving him assurances, maybe even concessions. I don't know what the content of the call contained, but it's like that is where you actually make real progress. You don't, like, if you're just using your influence to grow a following, but you never actually get anything to change in the world, well, then maybe you're not using it to the highest level. Like, he actually did that because he stood on principle, a thing that these people will never fucking do. He did that, and now maybe Donald Trump is 2% better on 2A. And if that's the case, then he is once again a better human being than the rest of you motherfuckers, and he's more courageous and he's more principled. So yeah, sorry for the rant. He's just a good kid.